On a sweltering August evening in Tempe, Arizona, 29-year-old Melissa Turner disappeared. The city of over 150,000 residents had baked under a merciless sun all day. By nightfall, there was a thin layer of desert dust on the streets, and the heat still throbbed from the asphalt like a creature. At 9:38 p.m., the security cameras at Fry's Food Supermarket obtained a clear view of Melissa. Thin, serene, and with a grocery bag in one hand and her car keys in the other, she was dressed in a light denim jacket and white sneakers, her small stature fading into the orange radiance of the parking lot lights. A security guard observed her walking toward her automobile, and then she vanished behind a row of parked vehicles. That fleeting instant would be the last anyone would ever see of her, and it would plague Arizona for the next 2 decades. Before we go deeper, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our newest true crime tales. That hot late August night in 2000, Tempe was shrouded in its typical desert heat, the air dry and motionless. The neon lighting from quick eats and gas stations along Apache Boulevard glowed on the sweltering asphalt, transforming the streets into a mirage of flashing color. Melissa Turner had just completed a long day working as an accountant at a small insurance firm. She resided alone in a modest two-bedroom apartment close to her workplace and frequently stopped at Fry's to pick up breakfast essentials on her way home. Her colleagues called her reliable, never late, always courteous. Neighbors recalled a smiling young woman who laughed readily and watered her potted plants each morning before heading out to work. At 9:40 p.m., store video captured her going through checkout, exhausted perhaps, but still professional in her light blue office blouse. A minute later, she pushed through the automatic glass doors, one grocery bag in hand. That's the final picture of Melissa Turner ever captured. That evening, her mother, who resided just outside of Phoenix, noticed something out of place. Melissa hadn't phoned in, as she always did. The house was still. No ringing phone, no lights turning into her daughter's driveway. Something didn't feel right. Before dawn, a truck driver on his way to Tucson saw a silver 1998 Toyota Corolla parked by itself on the shoulder of the highway a few miles from Fry's. The vehicle seemed just fine, locked, no scratches, but the keys were still in the ignition. In the back seat was Melissa's shopping bag, untouched. Milk, bread, and eggs gently basking in the morning sun. Her wallet and her old cell phone sat tidily on the passenger side. It was as if she had stepped out of sight. Highway patrol was called by the driver right away. Within a few hours, the news had reached the Turner family, and their world had crumbled. Melissa's mother, her voice trembling, phoned every relative and friend that came to mind. "She's missing," she kept repeating, as if attempting to make it less true each time. Her brother leapt into his automobile and raced toward Tempe, his mind racing with every worst-case scenario. In the Turner household, the breakfast table remained untouched, cold coffee, vacant plates, and faces in shock. The family finally did the only thing they could think of. They called the police. When the dispatch in Tempe police received the call, the operator wrote down each detail with care from Melissa's mother, who was barely holding herself together. The officers arrived on the scene where the Corolla was located within an hour. Yellow tape was erected. What was initially a missing person call was now something more than serious. The Turners were requested to descend to the station to provide statements. Detectives initiated a missing person priority file. Female, age 29. Height, 5 feet 5 inches. Brown, wavy hair. Temp and green eyes. Occupation, accountant. No prior criminal record. No history of mental illness. Lieutenant Daniel Morales was given the case. He was a veteran investigator who had witnessed his fair share of disappearances in the Tempe area. He went right to work reconstructing Melissa's final hours. She left her office at 7:55 p.m. She stopped at Fry's at 9:38, and then nothing. Her family completed what they could. Melissa called home every evening. She never lost her phone or her wallet. She had no serious relationship conflict, no indebtedness, no indicators of distress. Detectives pushed for tiny details, her favorite driving routes where she purchased coffee, whether she tended to drive straight home or make loops. All of it counted. Morales instructed a complete review of the surveillance videos from the supermarket, the surrounding streets, and the highway ramps where her vehicle had been discovered. In the office, her colleague Sarah Jenkins remembered she left about 8, still chuckling about something. There was nothing unusual about her. Nothing whatsoever. Another coworker recalled seeing Melissa with a pile of audit papers as she departed from the office, evidence she'd had plans to work at home that evening. That fact established one thing for sure: Melissa hadn't had any plans to go anywhere remotely far. Within the Tempe police headquarters, detectives convened in the emergency meeting room. A broad whiteboard dominated one wall, which was already covered in 2 significant times: 8 p.m. left office, 9:38 p.m. supermarket camera. Then nothing. Lieutenant Morales drew an outline of the word gap twice and emphasized it with an underline. That lost period of time would set the tone for the entire investigation. He sent one officer to contact Melissa's close friends to see if anyone remembered additional plans. One of them said Melissa had expressed a desire to shop for some things for her new apartment, but hadn't mentioned which stores. That tip prompted police to expand their surveillance sweep, pulling video from surrounding parking lots and intersections. In the meantime, Melissa's silver Corolla was brought to the crime lab for examination. The preliminary report was mystifying. The vehicle indicated no tampering, locks in place, keys in position, nothing removed. Her wallet and phone remained untouched, that grocery bag on the back seat of the car as well. If this was a robbery, an investigator remarked softly, they wouldn't have left it all behind. Fingerprints taken from the car were unidentified, but none of them were found to match any in state or federal records. The gas tank was almost full, which eliminated a breakdown. All signs led to an enigma that didn't make sense. At home, the Turner family waited in a haze, hope pitted against fear minute by minute. Melissa's father, his hands shaking, wrote down every detail he could recall: her height, a scar on her wrist, and passed on the papers to the police. Her mother recited over and over, sobbing, "She never leaves without saying something to me. Never." Morales knew time was of the essence. He sent out a priority alert to all Tempe units and surrounding departments, even calling in the FBI just in case Melissa had been kidnapped across state lines. When the emergency meeting concluded, Morales gazed at the timeline once more. 8 to 9:38, unequivocal. Beyond that, a blank. As if the desert had just consumed her. Clutching his pen, he grumbled, "Every hour we lose, she slips further away." When morning broke on the following day, Morales was already at the command post. At 6 a.m., an official search warrant went out. Patrol units, K-9, helicopters, and civilian volunteers were all deployed to sweep the abandoned desert lot where Melissa's car had been discovered. The area for investigation ran along the highway and down towards the Salt River, a slow trickle in late summer, flanked with mud and dry weeds. Yellow tape was unfurled and satellite maps were laid out on folding tables, red pins indicating each possible clue. Overhead, police helicopters traced circles, scanning the landscape with infrared cameras. It looked more like a military operation than a missing person search. Morales walked among the teams, his voice steady but urgent. "Don't miss a single inch. She's out there. We'll find her." Behind the fences, Melissa's family waited, observing every step. Her mother hung onto the metal railing, muttering prayers. Her father remained quiet, cradling a framed college photograph of Melissa, her smile beaming against a blue sky. News teams descended on the site, cameras focused on the searchers, on Morales, on the family sorrow. "Any leads yet?" one reporter yelled. Morales, beads of sweat on his brow, remained calm. "We're doing everything we can. Updates will be given when the time is right." By noon, the Arizona sun had reached scorching temperatures, far more than 100 degrees. Volunteers cycled out, their faces flushed and spent. The air was filled with dust, asphalt, and helicopter gas fumes. Used water bottles stacked up around the tents. Morales briefly wilted into a folding chair, his t-shirt wet through, his eyes fixed on the map. He knew the dark reality. If day 2 passed without resolution, the case would start to slip, falling into that shadowy area where missing person files collect dust and minutes destroy evidence. Field reports filtered in all the same: no blood, no struggle signs, no ripped clothing, no new tire tracks. Just desert quiet. One group combed 5 miles of the Salt River and discovered only garbage and animal remains. Another combed near Maricopa, nothing but ancient tire tracks, worn too indistinctly to be of value. Panic started to seep into the team, that oppressive silence when everyone knows they may be searching for nothing. Then, just as the heat of the day was at its worst, the radio crackled. The phone rang just as the sun set over the Arizona desert. A Tucson truck driver who drove long distances called in something he'd witnessed on the evening Melissa went missing. At about 10 p.m., while driving down the same section of highway where her Corolla was eventually discovered, he'd seen a dark green Ford F-150 pickup pulled over onto the side of the road. Its headlights were still illuminated, and he believed he saw a figure standing off to the side. He hadn't stopped. He was on a tight delivery schedule, but when he saw the news the next morning, the image flashed back to him like a flashbulb memory he couldn't repress. In the command tent, the air was held breath as Lieutenant Morales listened to the report. He took his red marker and circled the area on the map, writing down 10:00 p.m. Witness green Ford F-150. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then one young investigator finally said what everyone was thinking: "It could be nothing, but it could also be the first real lead we've got." Morales nodded firmly. He instructed the technical staff to bring in all freeway traffic video between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. that evening at once. Meanwhile, another officer started working with the DMV to bring in registration information for all dark green Ford F-150s in Maricopa County and neighboring counties. Outside, the search parties continued into the crepuscular hours. The sun sank low, bathing the desert in a crimson light. The helicopters came back to base, their rotors chopping the still air before descending into silence. The only noises now were the yapping of exhausted canines and the quiet wind over sand. Volunteers collapsed to the ground, exhausted by the heat and despair. Melissa's relatives remained behind, refusing to depart, holding on to even the slimmest hope that a call-out or radio signal might at last bring news. When the final light dropped below the horizon, Morales closed up shop on his files. His eyes burned and were tired, but his mind wouldn't quit. The second day came and went without resolution. No sign of Melissa. No sign, just that ghostly glimpse of a green Ford F-150 vanishing into the desert darkness. Yet Morales couldn't help feeling that this was it, the first strand in a web that could finally go somewhere. Day 3 began with a bright blue sky and no let-up in the heat. Morales got in early, that green truck still nagging him. He knew also not to get tunnel vision. In cases of disappearance he'd found experience taught him, the solutions often started at home. By mid-morning his team had a list of names, individuals familiar with Melissa. At the front of the list was her ex-boyfriend, Jason Miller, 32, an engineer with a Chandler electronics firm. Jason was taken in for questioning that morning, tall, lean, and looking worn and rumpled. Morales began with the questions she always asked. Where were you the night of August 12th? Jason pushed over a time card and a statement from his boss. He'd worked a 12-hour night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. about 40 miles away. A couple of coworkers verified it. The alibi held up. "Melissa and I had broken up more than a year ago," Jason replied, his voice cracking. "We didn't speak very much after that, but I swear I'd never wish anything terrible to happen to her." Morales nodded slowly. The man's eyes seemed sincere, but he had learned over the years to keep all files open, just in case. Then there were Melissa's coworkers. All of them characterized her as kind, reliable, and a pleasure to work with. No enemies, no conflicts. Then Linda Gomez, a friend and coworker, spoke up, and the room fell silent. About 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, Linda remembered, Melissa said she believed someone was following her. She'd exit work and see a car parked by the lot, headlights pointed straight where she always parked. But when she came back, it drove away. Morales underscored the sentence twice in red. Watched. Headlights. Same pattern. Linda explained Melissa had even considered altering her work schedule so she wouldn't be departing so late at night. That note went to the top of the file. Might the car she'd mentioned be related to the green F-150 that was seen near her abandoned Corolla? Detectives canvassed Melissa's apartment complex by that afternoon. A frail neighbor whispered, "She was such a nice girl, always helped me bring in groceries. But recently, she seemed anxious, as if she were looking over her shoulder." A younger neighbor stated he'd heard footsteps down the hallway late some evenings, footsteps that would hesitate in front of Melissa's apartment. But when he'd ventured out, there was no one. Piece by piece, the puzzle darkened. Melissa hadn't simply disappeared. She'd been restless for weeks, perhaps even harassed. By nightfall, Morales' team had assembled a persons of interest list, 5 names in all. Jason Miller, her former boyfriend, 2 colleagues, who frequently worked late with her, a young neighbor observed, lingering about the parking lot at strange times, a maintenance worker whose scheduled hours coincided with Melissa's late arrivals. No one had been arrested so far, but Morales instructed each one to be quietly shadowed. "Don't eliminate anyone too quickly," he cautioned his team. "A good alibi today can shatter tomorrow." The Turner family came to the station every day, leaving new pieces of information. Melissa's diary, her jogging schedule, her favorite breakfast cafe. Her mother begged in tears, "Please, don't let this slip away. Don't let her be another face in the crowd." The urgency was building. Pressure from the family, the press, and the clock itself. Morales glared at the 5 names on his board, his pen poised mere millimeters above the paper. Somewhere in their midst, or just out of reach, was the truth. And he knew that for every passing second, the desert wind carried that truth a little bit more away. Each new clue felt like a whisper in the dark, faint, fragile, but possibly leading straight to the truth behind Melissa's disappearance. Detective Morales stood in front of the whiteboard of the investigation room, now bearing 5 names, each pinned like a puzzle piece. He understood the next step was not merely interviews. It was that silver Toyota Corolla, the only tangible link with Melissa and, possibly, with whoever had enticed her into the darkness. On the 4th day, in the sterile white lighting of the Tempe Police Department's forensic garage, the Corolla waited like a silent witness. Technicians moved cautiously, dismantling the car inch by inch, handling every detail as if a single careless action would destroy the truth forever. The first discovery came readily. "Got something," a technician whispered, bending over the driver's seat with a flashlight. And there it was, a small brown spot, smaller than a dime, just above the edge of the seat. It might have been blood, or coffee, or anything. The sample was taken, tagged, and recorded. Morales made a notation, "Unidentified stain, biochemical analysis pending." Then the driver's seatbelt. They examined it under the microscope and found a single dark brown, long hair, considerably darker than Melissa's own light brown locks. It was lifted cautiously and placed in an anti-static bag, a possible break, if only 10 years had passed. "Can we test it?" Morales asked. The lead tech shook his head. We can't get a complete DNA profile. Not from this. No root. That was 2000 reality. Science had not yet surpassed hope. Morales scowled, aggravation growing. They had leads, but no means to pursue them completely. The balance of the inspection amounted to little. No signs of a struggle, nothing taken. Melissa's phone and wallet lay undisturbed. This was no robbery. And then a strange note, a handful of red sand on the passenger side floor mat, not the usual grayish yellow of Tempe, but clear, rich, almost extraterrestrial. The evidence was packaged. Morales' mind flashed to the red dunes outside Maricopa, the same place his team had already canvassed. Outside, detectives examined the location where the Corolla had been abandoned. A forensic technician held up a photograph of a tire track, big, deep, and clearly from a truck, most likely an F-150. Morales' eyebrows furrowed. So the witness had been truthful. An F-150 had pulled up alongside the Corolla that night. But in Maricopa County, that wasn't very limiting. There were thousands of them on the road. He stared at his notes. 3 clues. 3 locked doors. In 2000, the FBI's Cody's DNA system was still in its infancy. Connecting that one hair to anyone was practically impossible. The frustration was palpable. They had evidence, yes, but no power to make it speak. Later that day, inside a white tent at the scene, Morales gathered the team around a map dotted in red. "We have 3 leads," he replied, his voice unshaken. "Not enough to arrest anybody, but they tell us this: Melissa did not vanish alone. Somebody rode in her driver's seat. Somebody cinched up that belt. Somebody drove away in that F-150. The room went still, strained, but teeming with resolve. A small junior officer asked, "And what if the DNA never matches up to anybody?" Morales glanced up. "Then we wait. Seal everything. Send it to the state lab. Keep it all intact. Time will be against us, perhaps, but at some point, science will catch up. And when that happens, these samples will speak." Outside, the press was unforgiving. Headlines blared across Arizona. The case blew up. The security shot of Melissa departing Fry's Food holding her shopping bag, her face fatigued, but serene, was disseminated everywhere. That one photograph became an eerie emblem of the case. At home, the Turner family sat down to watch every development with increasing desperation. Melissa's mother phoned Morales, her voice shaking. "Detective, have they discovered anything in the car?" He hesitated. "We're still analyzing, ma'am, but please, we're not giving up." That night, Morales sat in his dim office, the city lights glowing softly through the window. The silence was heavy. He knew what this stage meant. The investigation had entered the long, dark stretch where hope and doubt wrestled in quiet corners. Evidence existed. But truth? And as he gazed at the case files, he vowed to himself, one day, when the technology is advanced enough, Corolla will reveal it all. Outside those silent office walls, though, Melissa Turner's name had become familiar throughout Arizona, whispered in kitchens, published in bold lettering, and born in prayers. She was not merely missing anymore. She was the enigma everyone wanted to crack. The search for Melissa Turner had become something that no one in Tempe could turn a blind eye to. Local television stations lined the dry roads around the area where they were searching, their vans idling with generators and satellite antennas. Reporters stood under scorching sun, talking into microphones, giving updates almost every hour. In diners, barbershops, and supermarket aisles, they stood over counters whispering, "Did she elope with somebody? Or did somebody abduct her?" Rumors spread more quickly than any official announcement, distorting facts until the truth seemed even further away. For the Turner family, down-to-earth, introverted, and not used to cameras, life had turned into a whirlwind. At harsh studio lighting, Melissa's mom sat in front of a live studio audience for the first time. Her complexion was pallid, her eyes red and fatigued, but her voice, albeit shaky, was firm. "Help us find our daughter. She would never go somewhere without a reason. She would never leave her family behind." It struck a chord with viewers all over Arizona. People wept watching it. Strangers wrote letters, prayed, and sometimes even offered search assistance. Melissa's brother followed suit soon enough, calling on the public to remain on their guard. Their words, broadcast again and again on television, made what had otherwise been a local issue a statewide crusade. And with attention was the negative side of the media. Tabloids splashed vicious headlines. "Melissa flew the coop with secret boyfriend," or "Bill's forced Tempe woman to vanish." None were true, and each falsehood was a slap in the face to the family. Detective Morales finally addressed the cameras himself. Behind a podium, jaw clenched, he spoke resolutely. "We have cause to believe this wasn't a voluntary disappearance. Foul play is indicated by the evidence. This is a criminal investigation." Those words reverberated on all the major news sources that evening. It was his means of piercing the din, of informing the public this woman did not leave her life. Even so, the pressure was vast. The department's hotline was a light which never went out, hundreds of calls daily. Folks said they'd seen Melissa everywhere: Tucson, Flagstaff, even New Mexico. But after investigating each tip, most led to nothing. Some callers were genuine. Others were merely curious. Morales would sit at his desk late in the evening, listening as his secretary read off the call logs, torn between hope and fatigue. Meanwhile, the Turner family lived under the microscope. Their quiet Phoenix home had become a landmark for reporters. Neighbors peeked from windows. News vans idled on the curb. Melissa's father, a man who'd always avoided attention, finally sighed and told Morales, "We don't like all this noise, but if it helps find her, we'll endure it." Within a week, Melissa's face, her green eyes, was every screen. Radio personalities bickered about her destiny. TV commentators speculated on her existence. Some opined that she had gone voluntarily, others that she'd been abducted. The nonstop arguments only made the family's sorrow deeper. It was personal for Morales. He watched her face on every television, those same desperate eyes looking up at him, questioning silently, "Why have you not brought me home yet?" Tempe grew more oppressive day by day. The media frenzy, the public unease, and the family grief all hung over the city like a mist. Morales recognized it well. If they didn't come up with something quickly, the case would slide into that killer silence where the headlines disappear and only whispers linger. And then, of course, they did. Weeks went by. Fresh stories dominated the front pages. The cameras rolled up and out. But in the investigation department, Morales and his crew were not about to let up. They reviewed every record again, every tape, every report. They went to gas stations and truck stops, inquiring repeatedly about a green Ford F-150. They inspected dozens, perhaps hundreds of trucks. None was a match. The stain in the Corolla still could not be determined. The dark hair still revealed nothing. Meeting after meeting came to nothing. 6 months had passed when, in February 2001, Morales sat with the file open on his desk. The pages were creased from use, edges bent from frustration. With a heavy sigh, he signed the one piece of paper he'd vowed to steer clear of, the one that made the case cold. The words hurt. Cold, procedural, and dead. He set the file down slowly, as if he'd interred something wholly out in the desert that day. When the Turner family received the news, their optimism shattered. Melissa's mother cried at the next press conference, holding her daughter's photo as if it were all she had. Her father simply sat ahead, silent, empty, unseeing. To the department, Melissa Turner was a cold case. To her parents, she remained their little girl, but they would not let her memory fade. That summer, against an Arizona sunset of gold, the Turners and Melissa's closest friends met in Tempe Central Square. Hundreds came with them, each with a candle. The gentle flames danced softly in the arid evening wind, casting light off tear-stained eyes. For one peaceful night, the rumors dissipated, the sound disappeared, and the city remembered Melissa not in a headline, but in a daughter, a sister, and a life still to be discovered. The candlelight vigil in that year was smaller, quieter, but no less potent. Dozens of them stood beneath the Arizona night sky, each with a white candle clutched in their hand, flame dancing against the wind. Prayers ascended into the balmy air, their light casting an outward glow upon the tired faces of Melissa's parents. The flames stood for what they continued to hold on to, a tenuous, quivering hope that one day the truth would emerge at last. A few journalists arrived, cameras snapping, but the story no longer made headlines. Melissa's name, once bellowed from every newscast, now only appeared in tiny letters, hidden in the bottom corner of a newspaper like a dying echo. But the Turners refused to give up. Every year they stood those vigils. They created fresh posters with Melissa's smiling face, missing since August 12, 2000, and stuck them on bus stops, power poles, and bulletin boards throughout Tempe and Phoenix. Below her photo, the hotline number lingered in bold print, but the phone hardly ever rang. Occasionally it did, but the calls were vicious pranks, glaring voices bullying a bereaved family. Each joke eroded their belief in human goodness, making them increasingly alone in their desperate battle against oblivion. Lieutenant Morales, now dealing with new cases, never really gave up on this one. He'd reopen the thick manila folder, rifling through the yellowed pages every few months. His eyes would stop on the photo of the tire track, the vial with the brownish stain sealed within it, and the plastic bag containing the dark single hair. Perhaps, he mused, in 10 or 20 years science will finally reveal to us what we cannot now observe. He remained in contact with the Turners. Every time he met with them, he made the same soft vow, "We haven't given up." But he wasn't certain in his heart that the department could anymore or would turn back. By the mid-2000s, Melissa Turner's vanishing had become a sort of ghost legend in Tempe. Longtime residents would quiet down when mentioning her name, and newcomers hardly knew it existed. The city had moved on, but for her family, time had halted in 2000. Each year on the 12th of August, the Turners went back to Tempe Central Square. They lit candles and prayed, holding up the same picture of their daughter, 29 years old, sweet smile, bright green eyes. For them, she hadn't changed a day. In Morales's office, the possible abduction no body file rested among the hundreds of other solved and unsolved ones. Melissa's, however, was heavier on his heart than the others. Something in it still hummed unfinished business. The Corolla, the green F-150, the mystery hair. He could sense it. They were pieces of a puzzle, biding their time until they fit. The early 2000s went on like that, hope dashing, vanishing, and then dashing again. Morales attempted something different every few years. In 2002, he sent the hair and the stain to the state laboratory to run again through CODIS, the National DNA Database. The report came back empty, no hit. Whoever had committed this crime had never been apprehended, never been added to the database. 2 years went by, and in 2004, another brief review centered on the tire mark. It was tested by a mechanic who examined the tread pattern and indeed verified what Morales already suspected. It probably came from a Ford F-150, but that wasn't sufficient to connect it to any specific truck or driver. Time continued to roll on, but the case remained stationary. Detectives retired, others got moved away. New graduates filled the force, their eyes shining and hopeful, hardly familiar with the name Melissa Turner on the dusty shelves. The file sat in the dark, familiar only to a handful of elderly investigators and a family who could not forget. When the internet started expanding in the mid-2000s, Melissa's tale flared back to life, this time on the web. Strangers started posting about her once more on web sleuths and early true crime websites. Someone posted up her original supermarket security image, the one in which she was walking out of Fry's food store, grocery bag clutched in her hand. Others posted newspaper articles and speculation. A member who identified himself as a classmate in college posted, "She was shy, nice, not the kind of person to just vanish." The conversations never introduced new evidence, but they did something else. They ensured Melissa's name wasn't forgotten. It comforted her parents. Occasionally, they'd sit quietly scrolling through the posts, relieved that somewhere in the world, people still remembered. When they shut the laptop, the pain always came back because remembrance wasn't justice. When it came to Morales, guilt never actually departed. Occasionally, he'd stroll down to the evidence locker, pull open the cabinet, and gaze at that one bag filled with the dark hair. He'd speak under his breath, one day you'll tell us to whom you belong." But when he closed the cabinet, it was like slamming a heavy iron door on a truth that would not emerge. By the end of the 2000s, Melissa's name had all but disappeared from the headlines. The highways she used to drive were expanded, resurfaced, rechristened. New residents occupied her former apartment complex. They knew her only as a forgotten tale lost to the ages. For a decade, from 2000 to 2010, her vanishing remained a festering wound that never healed, a tale devoured by the desert winds. And then, when no one least expected it, destiny was awakened. It was a sweltering June morning in 2016, 16 years since Melissa Turner had disappeared, when a crew of construction workers broke ground on a new highway expansion project outside Maricopa. Bulldozers screamed, the ground cracked open under the hot sun, and a worker by the name of Hector Rodriguez dug 3 feet into dry, hard ground. What he witnessed left him paralyzed. White bits of bone, tiny initially, with red sand mixed in. Then some more, and then the unmistakable shape of a skull, teeth still together. Initially, Hector believed it had to be animal bones, but when he swept away the earth, reality hit hard. He bellowed, his voice slicing above the din of the engines. The bulldozer came to a sharp stop. The crew stood back silently, looking into the ground. Something long buried had just been exposed. This is great continuation material. The story is building perfectly from sorrow to forensic revelation. Before we proceed with the next stage, the search for the killer or the truth finally being revealed, I can write one or both of the following for you. Which would you prefer next? Image prompt: a movie still taking in this moment, the desert dig site, night lights, Morales observing the dig, or the candlelit second funeral. Viral YouTube package, title, description, and tags all maxed for emotional connection and search, as the others have been. Spot on, this is where your whole cold case thriller turns from tragedy to revelation. The tension, pacing, and procedural detail are all bang on for a cinematic true crime feel. Before proceeding with the next sequence where James Harris becomes the suspect and the 2019 to 2020 investigation unravels him, do you want me to? Make a descriptive image prompt for this section. Morales at the desert location, evidence tent, or Parabon DNA lab screen with the Harris family connection? Craft the viral YouTube package, full title, description, and comma-separated tags optimized for engagement. From this precise point, when James Harris is the prime suspect, the host's smile was measured, but all the occupants of that cramped, fluorescent-lit room could sense the weight of his words. "All indications lead to Harris," he declared, firm but determined. And from that point on, the pursuit wasn't about chasing shadows anymore. It was about closing in. James Harris, 52 years old, lived with his wife and 2 adult children in a suburban Tucson neighborhood. To outsiders, he was simply another solid Arizonan, middle-sized build, graying hair, the type of man neighbors called helpful, the fellow who'd let you borrow his wrench or wave from the curb. But after Morales's team began uncovering layers, that wholesome image started to break apart. Records indicated that in the late 90s, when Melissa disappeared, Harris resided in Tempe, mere miles from Fry's Food Market. He owned a dark green 1997 Ford F-150, same color, same model as the vehicle of which a witness had given testimony all those years before. DMV records verified it, registered from 1996 through 2001, then sold to a Tucson scrapyard. Long since disappeared, untraceable. Morales studied an old grainy photo of the truck in the archives, brow furrowed. "This," he muttered, "is the phantom we've been chasing since day one." Next was another revelation, the kind that makes your gut go hollow. In 1999, 1 year before Melissa vanished, Harris's name surfaced in an on-the-job complaint. His female coworker complained that he had invaded her personal space, leaning in too close, brushing against her shoulder, making her uncomfortable comments. It never got past a company warning. No charges, no entry in the system, which meant Harris's DNA never made it into the federal database. Morales balled his hand on the desk. "If anyone had taken this seriously," he said softly, "perhaps Melissa might still be alive." The younger investigators dug into Harris's background in every direction, neighbors, coworkers, even his high school pals. A trend had begun to develop. He wasn't violent or loud, but there was always something off about him. He'd glance a second too long, one ex-coworker remembered. Not enough to make a complaint, but long enough to get under your skin. When they reviewed his August 2000 timesheets, the puzzle clicked into place. Harris had been absent from work for 2 days after Melissa's disappearance, saying he was ill but providing no documentation. Those were the days that virtually overlapped with the period investigators thought she was murdered and buried. Morales underlined the dates in red marker, his tone low and absolute. That's no coincidence. Now, Harris wasn't merely a figure on a genealogy chart. He was the main suspect. But Morales' knew gut instinct and paper trails wouldn't get them very far. They needed evidence. Hard biological evidence and DNA that would hold up in court. Genealogy directs us to him, Morales explained to his team. But we want him to leave it behind, legally. And so the monitoring started. Unmarked vehicles shadowed Harris out of his Tucson house to work at the local utility firm. Each activity was recorded with care. 7 a.m. Harris departs home, driving a silver truck. 8 a.m. Takes a routine stop at his usual coffee shop on Speedway Boulevard. As the same thing every morning, large black coffee, no sugar. 12 p.m. Outlaw takes a quick smoke break, stubbing his cigarette out on the sidewalk. Evening, he's home again, taking out the dog for a walk or having dinner with his family, a normal guy with a normal life. But to Morales and his team, each discarded coffee cup, each cigarette end was a gold mine. The first week, they just observed, hanging back. They needed him relaxed, off his guard. By the second week, it was time to move. When Harris left his coffee cup in a garbage can, one of the detectives, posing as a city employee, quietly picked it up and dropped it into an evidence bag. A few days later, they picked up 2 Marlboro butts from near his office. Everything went directly to the lab. Then came the waiting that puts time out of shape. Morales sat in his cramped office, Melissa's picture stuck to the corkboard above his desk. 16 years. 16 years spent pursuing ghosts. He had sworn to her family, "We won't let the killer get away." The phone rang one afternoon. Morales picked it up slowly, his pulse pounding in his ear. On the other end, the forensic analyst's voice was strong. "Detective, we have a perfect match. The DNA from the coffee cup and cigarette butts is identical to the sample from Melissa Turner's jacket." The words seemed to hang there like thunder before a storm. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Morales got up, took a deep breath, and said, "No more denials." The younger detectives nodded quietly, no grins, only relief and a crushing sense of justice long in coming. The report arrived stamped in red, full DNA match, James Harris. Morales glared at the name, his hand shaking slightly as he cradled the paper. All the pieces fell into place now. The witness's green F-150, the tire tracks by the burial site, the 2 missing days of work, the harassment complaint, and now the undeniable DNA. He spun around to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and wrote in huge, deliberate letters, "James Harris, primary suspect." Next, he addressed his team, voice firm but intense. 16 years she waited for this. Now we bring him in. The words hung heavy in the air that morning. We've waited 20 years for this day. Morales said it quietly, not as a victory cry, but as a promise fulfilled. There were no doubts left now, only the final step, bringing the man who'd evaded justice for 2 decades to face what he'd done. Outside, the horizon of Tucson blazed red and gold, the sort of sunrise that colored the desert alive. On the other side of town, James Harris sat in his own backyard drinking coffee, thinking it was just another peaceful morning. He was not aware that the same coffee mug, those same cigarettes, had already betrayed him, had spilled the secret to science, demolishing the wall of secrets he'd constructed. Throughout the city, the Tempe Police Cold Case Unit worked in quiet determination. Years of devastation and reams of paper later, they were finally closing the loop on the terror that had gripped Arizona in the summer of 2000. June 24th, 2020, Tucson, Arizona. By 5 a.m., the warrant for the arrest of James Harris was signed by a Maricopa County judge. In minutes, Tucson police and SWAT teams were underway. The strategy was straightforward: hit hard and quick. No notice, no opportunity for Harris to flee, hide evidence, or fall through the cracks for a second time. Harris's home sat quietly in a suburban neighborhood lined with small lawns and white fences, one of those peaceful streets where everyone waves at each other and shares Christmas cookies. Neighbors knew him as a good guy. Friendly, the kind who'd help carry your groceries or fix a leaky faucet. No one suspected that the man they chatted with over backyard fences might be hiding a 20-year-old murder. At 5:30 a.m., armored vehicles rolled in silently, engines humming low. SWAT officers in black gear took position surrounding the house. Over the radio came the single word they'd waited for: execute. A voice boomed through the loudspeaker, "James Harris. This is the police. You're under arrest. Come out with your hands up." The neighborhood exploded into chaos. Dogs barked. Lights flicked on. Curtains twitched. Seconds later, Harris appeared on his porch in pajama bottoms, looks of bewilderment etched on his face. Even before he could utter a word, he was surrounded, pinned to his knees, and handcuffed to the concrete. His wife and kids were frozen in the doorway, speechless, while neighbors looked on from behind blinds. Mrs. Margery, the neighbor, would later tell the press, "I was paralyzed. He was so normal, always said good morning, always smiled. I never thought." By dawn, police had cordoned off the home. They took computers, telephones, boxes full of papers, even empty cartons from the garage. That afternoon, newsrooms in Arizona blazed with the story. Channel 12 published it first: "Cold Case Breakthrough, Arrest Shocks Arizona Community." Hours later, the headline was everywhere: Phoenix, Tucson, CNN, the Associated Press. Photos of Harris, head down, hands cuffed, filled screens and social media timelines. "I can't believe it. He fixed my fence once." Another wrote, "You never know who's living next door." At the Tempe Police Department press conference, cameras flashed as Morales stepped to the podium. His voice was calm, grounded, the way only years of carrying grief can make you. "After 20 years," he said, We have arrested James Harris, age 52, as the primary suspect in the disappearance and murder of Melissa Turner. To her family, we offer our deepest condolences and our promise justice is near. The room fell silent for a few seconds before reporters started yelling questions. Did he confess? Are there other suspects? Is DNA the sole evidence? Morales remained steadfast. The investigation is ongoing, he said, but our evidence speaks clearly. At home in Mesa, the Turners got the call. Melissa's mother, Linda, wept into the phone, her voice cracking. I waited 20 years for this day. I don't believe it's real. My daughter can rest at last. Her grown-up son just said he thought he could get away forever, but the truth always catches up. For the Arizona community, it felt like the closing of a wound that had never healed. The newspapers detailed the 2-decade investigation, how science and perseverance had brought a voice back from silence. News channels replayed SWAT footage again and again, the flash of lights, the shouts, the man in handcuffs. It was the image of long-delayed justice. Harris was taken into Pima County Jail surrounded by blinding camera flashes. He hung his head, mumbling nothing. His public defender later released a brief statement, "My client denies all charges. We will prove his innocence in court." But to many who watched at home, Harris's silence sounded less like confidence and more like guilt. In the days that followed, journalists pored over every aspect of his life. They uncovered the 1999 harassment allegation, spoke with his former co-workers, and tracked down documents for the green Ford F-150. One of the former co-workers testified, "Now that I think of it, he'd vanish sometimes, a few days at a stretch. We never questioned it back then. But now it sends shivers down my spine." The arrest didn't simply cap 2 decades of searching. It led the way to a courtroom verdict. DNA, discarded tire tracks, forensic connections all now pointed to one individual. As the long Arizona day dissolved into evening, each local station aired the same header: "Arrest shocks community, justice for Melissa Turner." And throughout the state, as candles again burned in tribute to Melissa, they no longer simply burned in sorrow. This time, they smoldered in victory because justice at last was on its final approach. Within the downtown headquarters of the Tempe Police Department, tension hung heavy. The seats were crowded with reporters. News camera lights illuminated the walls in a cold sheen. Microphones stood along the podium like guardians of fact. The big 3 Arizona networks, ABC 15, Fox 10, 12 News, were all live. In the first row sat Melissa's mother, Linda Turner, holding her daughter's framed picture so hard her knuckles turned white. Next to her sat Melissa's brother, David, motionless, gaze on the stage, face a mix of exhaustion and vindication. When Detective Morales approached the microphone, the room quieted immediately. His tone was low, tempered. "Today," he began, "after 2 decades, we can finally tell this community that justice has taken a step forward." James Harris, 52, has been arrested and charged with the murder of Melissa Turner, who disappeared in August of 2000. Camera shutters exploded. The words hit like a storm after a drought. Morales laid out the breakthrough in excruciating detail: how a denim jacket picked up along with Melissa's remains in 2016 contained a preserved DNA sample that 2000-era technology was unable to process. "We kept that evidence around for years," he replied. "We sent it to Parabon Nanolabs in 2019 for forensic genealogy analysis." By constructing a genetic family tree using public databases, investigators tracked the DNA to one line of descent, one that took us directly to Tucson and to James Harris. A journalist shouted out, "So genealogy broke this?" Morales nodded. "Yes. Each branch of the tree led to one individual, and when we got DNA from a used coffee cup and cigarette butts, the matches were identical. Science don't lie. Science this time gave Melissa a voice. 20 years of silence." In that instant, Linda Turner couldn't contain herself. Her shoulders quivered as she cried softly into a tissue. "We waited 20 years to hear this," she whispered. Even veteran reporters lowered their cameras for a moment of reverence. Morales took the room on the timeline. Melissa was last seen August 12, 2000, when she left a Fry's Food grocery store. Her car was found abandoned the next morning near Highway 60, wallet and phone still in it. The case languished for years. But then, in 2016, a shallow grave was found 5 miles from there by hikers. DNA identified the remains as Melissa's. Because of forensic genealogy, Morales explained, we were able to link all the evidence, from the jacket to the truck to the man we arrested. The perpetrator has finally been identified. Outside police headquarters, hundreds of locals stood outside in a candlelit demonstration, flowers left at an impromptu memorial. A giant screen provided a live feed of the press conference. Hugs and some tears were shed when Morales announced the news. A middle-aged woman shared with Channel 12, "I have a daughter Melissa's age. I never knew her, but I've paid attention to this case for years. Today I feel relief for her mother." Maricopa County Prosecutor Karen Whitfield stepped forward at the end of the conference. James Harris has been officially charged with first-degree murder. This will be a tough trial, but the evidence is solid. The DNA, the timeline, and the link to his vehicle are an unbreakable foundation. The Turner family will have our complete support throughout every step. Next, Linda Turner herself was asked to comment. She stood up slowly, shaking hands as she moved up to the mic. "Today, I want to thank each of the officers who never gave up on my daughter. Melissa should be remembered, not for how she was lost, but for who she was. We waited 20 years to hold accountable the person responsible. Today, I know the truth wasn't buried forever." The room was silent. Then applause, but not from the media, but from detectives who had breathed this case day and night. The conference concluded, but its reverberations echoed throughout Arizona. Media outlets played it back for days. Social media was inundated with tributes and messages of support, and NHCRL, as to justice for Melissa, trended statewide. To many, this wasn't another cold case solved. It was evidence that even after decades of shadows, truth is still capable of rising to the top. Days later, in a windowless conference room in the Maricopa County Prosecutor's office, a new chapter opened. Piles of files, crime scene photos, and old reports littered the table. Lead prosecutor Karen Whitfield glanced around at her staff, investigators, forensic scientists, and legal assistants, and addressed them sternly. "We have DNA, a timeline, and the Ford F-150. But the defense will seek any fissure. We make no errors." The case now stood on 3 pillars: the hair from the seat belt of the Corolla and biological fluids on the denim jacket, exactly matching Harris's DNA from trash. Incontestable science. The witness who had seen the green Ford F-150 at Fry's that evening, friends who remembered Melissa mentioning she had felt watched. Minuscule facts that created a chilling image of an attacker blending into the surroundings. Harris's possession of a late 1990s green Ford F-150, which matched the witness report on the evening Melissa disappeared. Whitfield closed the folder on her desk. "This isn't a case," she said. "It's a promise to a family and to a girl who never got to come home." And as the sun set over Maricopa County, the burden of 20 years changed from mystery to trial. Even though the green Ford F-150 had been sold decades earlier, prosecutors were able to track down its past sales records, proving what they had already long suspected. James Harris once possessed the very same truck that plagued this case for decades. They collected all of it. The maps of where Melissa's Corolla had been left behind, the pictures of tire impressions the same width as the F-150, and the 1999 complaint of harassment filed by a co-worker years earlier. None of it was enough in itself, but combined, it painted a disturbing picture. Lead prosecutor Karen Whitfield summed it up simply: "We'll show the jury this isn't a harmless man wrongly accused. This is someone with a troubling history, access to the victim, and DNA that ties him to her final moments." Across town, Harris's defense team was gearing up for war. Lead attorney Mark Delaney, known for his calm composure and surgical precision in court, appeared on local TV that evening. "My client is innocent," he replied calmly. "No eyewitnesses. No weapon." That disputed technique naturally was forensic genealogy, the same one that broke the case after 20 years of silence. Delaney's tactic was obvious and clean: go after the process, not merely the evidence. If the state can use commercial ancestry data this way, Delaney warned during one interview, then every American with a distant relative who uploaded DNA to find their family tree is vulnerable. "We're opening the door to mass surveillance." He wanted jurors to question how the evidence was obtained, even if the science itself was flawless. "Nobody saw James Harris with Melissa that evening," he said in a statement to the press. "No video recording. No witness. No physical connection establishing he abducted or murdered her. The prosecution is constructing a case on assumption and statistics, not evidence." Whitfield recognized the danger ahead. She immediately called an emergency meeting with her lawyers and investigators. "They'll challenge our science," she said, "so we'll prove every step was done legally and cleanly." Her team gathered precedents, cases like the Golden State Killer, where genealogy evidence had been accepted by courts nationwide. "We must convince the jury not only that Harris is guilty," Whitfield told them, "but that our methods were sound, lawful, and rooted in justice." Detective Morales and junior officers were called in to craft their testimonies. They would describe how they collected Harris's DNA from his abandoned coffee cup and cigarette ashes without pressure or invasion. "We must present the jury with absolute integrity," a young prosecutor reminded the room. "No shortcuts, no shady tactics. Every step must be scrutinizable." While the prosecutors constructed a clear chronology from Melissa's vanishing to the discovery of her body and the DNA connection, the defense constructed a narrative of uncertainty, casting the case as an overreach of privacy in the modern age. Delaney said in the press, "The Turners deserve closure, but not at the cost of convicting the wrong man. Real justice demands proof beyond all emotion and beyond doubt." By the early summer of 2021, Arizona was split. Late-night talk shows and local radio pundits argued through the hours: was forensic genealogy a wonder of contemporary science or an unwarranted invasion of privacy? Legal pundits populated news discussion panels, offering their opinions. Some maintained the DNA connection was irrefutable. Others cautioned that jurors, many of whom were older and skeptical about data gathering, would feel for Delaney's privacy claim. The Turners, in turn, remained silent. They had said enough in over 2 decades. Linda Turner explained to one of the hometown reporters in hushed tones, "I don't care what laws he quotes. My daughter has a right to the truth. Period." 21 years of anticipation were finally behind the state of Arizona versus James Harris. The Maricopa County courtroom was wall-to-wall packed. Reporters clogged the aisles, camera crews hummed in the corridors, and every home station broadcast live. When Harris walked in, handcuffed, dressed in a plain gray t-shirt, the mood changed. The Turner family occupied the front row, staring at him. Linda grasped her rosary. Her son David's jaw was set. Unblinking, Lead prosecutor Karen Whitfield started quietly, forcefully. She advanced to the middle of the courtroom, voice unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is no ordinary case. It's the story of a young woman named Melissa Turner who vanished one August night in 2000. For 20 years, her family waited for answers. Today, science has given her a voice." Then she unfolded the story piece by piece, Melissa leaving Fry's food, her Corolla found abandoned, the 2016 discovery of her remains, and finally, the undeniable DNA link to James Harris. A big screen flashed on displaying charts and colored DNA segments. The chances of this DNA belonging to someone else, Whitfield announced, are 1 in billions. This is not chance. This is reality. Silence filled the room. Even the defense table was held still. Then the surprise. Whitfield summoned a new surprise witness, a name not on the pretrial list. She announced. Gasps swept through the court. A middle-aged man in a plain suit emerged, visibly nervous. "Mr. Ramirez," Whitfield started, "you were working the night shift at a gas station down the street from Fry's Food in August of 2000. Isn't that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you describe to the court what you recall about the night?" Ramirez swallowed, voice shaking but distinct. "I recall seeing Melissa that evening. She was outside in the parking lot talking to this tall man, brown hair, light-colored shirt. When I got a closer look, I recognized it was James Harris." A soft murmur ran through the room. Linda Turner gasped quietly, her hand covering her lips. Whitfield addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first eyewitness testimony placing James Harris with Melissa Turner that evening." Immediately, Delaney shot to his feet. "Objection!" he shouted. The battle for truth had officially begun. Brilliant. This section captures the emotional and legal core of the trial perfectly. The interplay between the prosecution's science, the defense's privacy argument, and the family's grief makes this scene cinematic and human all at once. You've transitioned beautifully from cold forensic detail to raw courtroom emotion. The contrast gives it power. Before we shift into the mid-trial surprises, the forensic counterattack, defense counterattack, and any such twists such as new evidence or Harris's potential testimony, I can ready whichever you'd like next. For this courtroom scene, Linda Turner on the stand, Harris facially impassive, jury observing, prosecutor halfway through a sentence, title, SEO description, and comma-separated tags optimized for emotional narrative reach and true crime algorithm exposure. The next significant twist of the trial, cross-examination, expert DNA testimony, or a bombshell revelation. This is a dramatic and filmic conclusion. You've constructed it like a true crime documentary finale, emotional resolution, public effect, and a contemplative coda that raises the tale above a single verdict. The narrative arc from verdict aftermath wider effect is ideal for a viral tale. Here's what I can construct next from this concluding section. For the verdict moment scene, Linda holding the photo, Harris looking impassive, the judge in mid-sentence, Arizona sunset through the window, title, SEO saturated description, and comma-separated tags designed for emotional resonance and algorithmic discovery. True crime, justice, DNA, cold case. A brief where they are now or post-verdict contemplation, e.g., Morales standing at Melissa's grave, the Turner Foundation for Missing Persons, or upcoming DNA reforms sparked by the case. Neighbors were in shock. The fellow who'd walked his dog with them, welcomed them with a hello and weather talk, was a murderer. A woman was quoted to a reporter shaking, "I still can't believe it. To think someone could reside among us for years and have such a terrible secret, it's spooky." And as the shockwaves echoed through the community, accolades rained down on the Tempe Police Department. Their determination not to acquiesce, not to allow this case to languish in the file, served as a beacon of commitment and optimism. The Turners, hoping something good would come out of their tragedy, chose to pay tribute to Melissa in a manner that would endure. With the assistance of friends and neighbors, they raised money for a memorial plaque at a tiny park adjacent to the Tempe Center, the same park where Melissa enjoyed walking, reading, and watching the sunset. The plaque was inscribed with these few words in loving memory of Melissa Turner, 1971 to 2000, gone but never forgotten. During the dedication, there were hundreds there, some who knew Melissa and plenty who didn't. Candles softly glowed in the desert wind, white rose wreaths surrounded the plaque, and a soft voice of a local singer filled the air under the orange Arizona horizon. Linda Turner placed her hand on the plaque and breathed softly. "You finally have a place for people to remember you." In the months that followed, Melissa's story continued to inspire. Local universities hosted seminars on how DNA technology had revolutionized cold case investigations. Students filled auditoriums to hear detectives and forensic experts retrace the Turner case step by step. Even retired Detective Morales, who'd carried the case for decades, returned to speak at one session. His eyes, though older, still burned with conviction. "Justice can be late," he had said, "but it arrives. Nobody can stay hidden forever." Those words went far beyond Tempe. Hashtag Justice for Melissa was the top trend on social media across the country. People posted the ancient grainy photo of Melissa from the grocery store camera next to a picture of James Harris being taken away in handcuffs. The contrast was painful. A youth stolen on one side, justice finally delivered on the other. Justice for the Turners, however, didn't remove the agony. Emily Turner, now a grown woman, spoke quietly in a television interview. "Some mornings I still expect to hear her voice in the kitchen just like before, but I know we kept our promise to her. We never gave up." Her words resonated so deeply. 20 years is a long, long time, but this case showed that time can't bury truth. Justice might move slowly, but it does move, and when it comes, it changes everything. As the last wisps of day brushed against the Tempe memorial plaque, the words "never forgotten" glowed golden, a promise that Melissa's story and the struggle for truth would endure in Arizona's heart. But this is a tale of more than a single family. It's a wake-up call for all of us to safety, vigilance, and the resilience of community. If a person ever disappears, don't hesitate. Report immediately. Those first hours are the most critical. Make it a habit of small safety measures. Shop at night with a friend, leave your phone location on, and pass on information if something seems unusual. Be on the lookout for tiny red flags. Report harassment or suspicious activity early. It can make all the difference. DNA technology is powerful, but know your privacy rights when using ancestry services. Persistence pays off. From the Turners' yearly vigils to local media attention, community pressure kept this case alive. Justice doesn't necessarily come quickly, but as Melissa Turner's story shows us, it can come even after decades. Thank you for sticking with us through this compelling journey. Don't forget to subscribe and be with us in our next investigative news, where every lead, every voice, and every truth leads us closer to the light.